Given the recent announcement that Oddworld Soulstorm will come out on April 6th, I really wanted to make a video speculating about the game based on what we've seen so far. I've been playing the Oddworld games for around 15 years now, and one of my favorite parts of them have always been the locations. From the meat processing plant of Rupture Farms to the desert of Scrabania to the woods of Paramonia, Oddworld does such a good job of telling its story through the environment and the artistic surroundings. So I'm really looking forward to all of the locations in Soulstorm, which is the first brand new 2D platformer that Oddworld Inhabitants have released in over 20 years. I think that the locations we've seen so far give an excellent insight as to what the story will be of Oddworld Soulstorm. For those of you who don't know, Soulstorm will be a reimagining of the game Oddworld Abe's Exodus from 1998. While Soulstorm will be a brand new game, it will feature some story elements and locations that existed back in Exodus. Throughout the video, I will be referencing the concept art book, Oddworld Abe's Origins, specifically the map at the end of the book, because I think that map gives an excellent view as to the pathway that the story will take throughout Soulstorm. In the lower left-hand corner of the map, you can see the locations that Abe traveled to in the original game, Abe's Odyssey, and the 2014 remake, New and Tasty. Abe started his journey as a slave in the meat processing plant known as Rupture Farms, but then as he escapes from Rupture Farms, he goes to the sacred meditation ground for the native mudokons known as Mosaic Lines. From there, he travels to Paramonia and then Scrabania, and takes part in the ancient trials that give him the hand scars and allow him to become the Shrikle, giving him the power to return to Rupture Farms and destroy it. In the final cutscene, he returns to Mosaic Lines and celebrates saving all of the mudokons from Rupture Farms. And here is where Soulstorm is set to begin. It's important to note that Moloch, the head of Rupture Farms, will be returning in this game. But in the picture of Rupture Farms that they shown, the place was completely destroyed, so I do not believe that Abe will be returning there in this game. The game will likely start in the Mosaic Lines, just as Exodus did. I don't know if this will be a playable location, but it wasn't in Exodus, so it's possible that again in this game there will just be something that calls Abe to action to move along. We know that Moloch has this line.
Did those fugitive morons burn down their own hideout?
But we don't know if the Mudokon hideout is referring to the Mosaic Lines, and whether the Mudokons destroy the Mosaic Lines. That doesn't seem likely because the Mosaic Lines is a sacred place, so I doubt that they would go about destroying them, but at the moment it's not known how this game will start. From there, Abe will likely move on to Gorge. We know Gorge is a location in Oddworld Soulstorm due to this post on the Oddworld Inhabitants website. It mentions new environments such as Gorge, Sorrow Valley, and Fico Depot. I believe Gorge refers to this place that we've seen in trailers. The name seems to fit due to it being a rocky valley, in what seems to be a Gluckin mining operation, due to the rocks hanging from the railways and the various monorails moving around, and all of the mechanical equipment that's seen throughout the area. The other thing I notice is that there's many signs for a classic refresher. I assume that this is Soulstorm Brewery's beginning ways of advertising for Soulstorm Brew. Maybe this is a new brew at the time, so they're just starting to advertise, and maybe this is how mudokons start to get interested in drinking Soulstorm Brew. At the same time, Moloch's blimp shows in the background, so this could also be earlier in the game when Moloch is chasing after Abe. I don't know exactly when the events happen, but I assume that Moloch being an enemy is an active part of the beginning of the game. One other thing that I noticed in Gorge was that at one point there is a door there, and it's the same door that was in Abe's Exodus in the Slig barracks. Now, this was a little interesting to see, because in Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus, every single location had a unique door design, and I don't know if that'll be the case in Soulstorm. I really hope it is, because I really like going to the different locations and them each having their own unique designs for different things, such as door frames. I wonder if Soulstorm will have a similar approach to designing the different locations. Next, Abe moves on to Sorrow Valley. I believe that this is referring to this location that we can see here. There seems to be a lot of underground caves. It's really red, really rocky. I think a lot of flying sligs have flamethrowers here, which is why there's so many flames all around the location. From there, Abe moves on to the Phat Station. Now, I believe that the Phat Station was at some point renamed to the Old Trellis because there's been no indication that there is a location called the Phat Station, but there is this place called the Old Trellis. It seems to be an area with a train track, which would make sense if it was renamed from Phat Station. There are two different signs for the Old Trellis that both say that there are 253 mudokons total there. In one area of the Old Trellis, there's a mechanical flintlock, and those flintlocks have only previously been seen in Rupture Farms, but in this area there is a sign right below it that says Open Pen Doors. It's possible that the purpose of the flintlocks in this game will be for opening pens of mudokons so that a multitude of them can be released all at once. Also, at the very top of the screen, there's another sign that says Open Pen Doors, so there might be another flintlock on top of that. There might just be a continuous train of going up and up and up, and keep releasing pens of mudokons to release all 253 in this area. Additionally, Mulek's blimp appears to appear at the top of the Old Trellis, so it's possible that once you get to the top, that Mulek will arrive, and that'll be a big plot point. A couple small things that I noticed is that once again the Slig barracks store appears. But not only that, this clip has been shown 2 times in 2 different videos of Oddworld, and the lighting or the coloration of the walkways is actually different, so it's interesting to compare the two at different stages of development of the game. There's also a short clip of Abe running through a valley. It kind of looks like the same environment as the Old Trellis, but I'm not sure if this is part of it or not. The mudokons can then take the train from Old Trellis to the Slig barracks. And it turns out that there is an area that appears to be on a moving train, so it's possible that this will be when this occurs in the game. I don't have much to say about this area, there's just a lot of explosions, and what's really interesting is that there's a giant robotic machine called Slig Mama. Perhaps that'll be a boss fight or something. There's never really been a boss fight in Oddworld before, but that'll be really interesting when we see it. Eventually, the train reaches Slig Barracks. Now, this is the first location that I've mentioned so far that was previously in Abe's Exodus, and the look of Slig Barracks in Soulstorm is very similar to that of Abe's Exodus. It's where all of the Sligs train to become the enemies that they so iconically are. Slig Barracks is stereotypically green, and it has camping tents in the background and many watchtowers. The interesting thing about the exterior of Slig Barracks in this game is that there's a large white building in the distance. I'm curious to see if that will be the main area that Abe will have to go. There's been no confirmation as to whether there will be a General Dripic equivalent in this game, but I'm sure there will be a Gluckin running the Slig Barracks, as there was back in Abe's Exodus. There appears to be a car that you can ride in and shoot people in it. That's interesting. They've never had anything like that before. This is the only area in which slogs have been confirmed so far, which makes sense because they are Slig's best friend. A couple interesting things to note is that there's one sign that says Furnace and another sign that says Com Tower. I assume that these will be various locations that you can go to within the Slig Barracks. Possibly the Com Tower is the important place. Maybe Soulstorm Brewery has some communications with Slig Barracks, and the mudokons must shut this down. It's also good to know that the doors have in fact returned in Slig Barracks. After departing from Slig Barracks, the mudokons then travel to Necrom. If this map theory is correct, then that means that Necrum Mines will not be the first location in Oddworld Soulstorm as they were in Abe's Exodus. But it's exciting to see that the mines have returned nonetheless. When I think of Necrom Mines, I think of vast, sprawling, blue underground caves that seem to expand for miles and miles. And the clips we've seen from Soulstorm have not been disappointing at all. From the bone saws to the flamethrowers to the rideable minecarts, this location seems like it'll be absolutely fantastic. One interesting thing that I noticed was that one of the signs says Necrom and that there's only 30 employees in that area. And then another sign says Necrom/Silo, and there are well over 3,000 employees. I don't know if this is 2 different locations, or if they're both part of Necrum Mines, or if the signs have changed over the course of development. I'm curious to see what that will be as the game comes out. Another thing is that, like in the Old Trellis, there is another flintlock, and under the flintlock it says release pen, so we can assume that there's another pen of mudokons that's held here in Necrum Mines. Under that sign, there's a sign that says holding pen 9, so it's possible that there's multiple holding pens for the mudokons in Necrum Mines, which makes sense to make up the 3,000 mudokons that are there. What's slightly interesting is that in Necrom Mines, the sign says release pen, while in the Old Trellis it says open pen doors. I don't know if that's a difference that they decided to just be different in the different locations, or if they just hadn't decided on the exact wording while they were still developing the game. Either way, it seems that these flintlocks will be really crucial for saving lots of mudokons. In this game, Necrum Mines are run by the Baron of Necrom. There wasn't a Gluckin who ran the Necrum Mines in Abe's Exodus, but it'll be interesting to see what his character is like and how he runs the mines in this game. Next up, we have Necrom Caves. I believe this is still part of Necrom because all of the caves have the similar blue theme to the Necrom Mines. This seems to be deep within caves, and Abe generally needs a headlamp to pass through. And at the same time, there are creatures that are attacking Abe, where if he shines light on them, they go away. I'm not sure if this is Soulstorm's equivalent of Fleeches, or if Fleeches will be in the game elsewhere, but it'll be interesting to see. I think these mines will be replacing Necrom Jungle because, as I said earlier, Necrom isn't a jungle in this game, but there also appears to be some sort of temple structure, as there are many hidden traps that Abe has to conquer throughout the caves. I believe as Abe travels further and further into Necrom Caves that he will eventually stumble upon a full Mudokon temple. This one clip really reminds me of Mudokon temples because that triangle in the background kind of reminds me of the flintlocks from Abe's Odyssey. Another reason that I think that this temple is in Necrom is because there's many bird statues around, and we know that Mudokons descended from birds. And also in this photo of Necrom Mines that we have on the outside, there are similar bird statues. So I believe that this temple is at the very heart of Necrom Caves. There's another clip that has another similar triangle thing. I don't know if this is part of the Necrom Caves as well. Temples in Oddworld usually come in twos, so it's possible that this is a completely different temple. The stones here kind of remind me of the Sorrow Valley clips that I showed earlier, but there's simply not enough clips of the locations to know for certain. There is another clip of a different temple that has a giant face of a Mudokon on it, and a sort of blue-green background. This kind of reminds me of the Paramonian Temple background. I'm not sure if that's related. I doubt that Abe is returning to the Paramonian Temple in this game, but this might be another temple as well. At the heart of this temple is what I believe will be the Beehive, where Abe meets the shaman in all of the clips. When I started making this video, I thought there would be two distinct temples, one for Necrom Temple with the birds and a different one for the bees. But on the map right next to Necrom, there is the symbol that Abe gets tattooed on him back in Exodus. And unlike in Exodus where he was tattooed by the three weirdos, here we can see in clips that he seems to be tattooed in the Beehive Temple. So I think that this might be part of Necrom as well. There's no clips that definitively show whether or not the Beehive will be a playable area, but there are two clips in which Abe is on a walkway, and it's certainly possible that there could just be like a short walking level, but it's still not known whether there will be trials in the Beehive Temple or not. That being said, it would be really interesting if there were trials involving the Beehive tribe, because there have been bees in Abe's Odyssey before, and that could lead to interesting puzzle solving. On the map, Mudamo and Mudanchi are both locations outside of Necrom, as they were in Exodus, but so far, unfortunately, there has been no confirmation as to whether these vaults will be in the game. I really enjoyed the way the caverns looked back in Exodus, so I hope they at least make an appearance, but it's uncertain at the present moment. The Mudokons then take the train from Necrom Mines to what the map at the time called Comet Depot. First, they seem to arrive at a storage yard outside the train station. The great thing about this area is that it shows that the depot will in fact be called Fico Depot. Previously, there was an art poster that shows that the depot will instead be called Comet Depot, but they went back and forth as to whether they were actually going to name it that. This clip seems to confirm that it will in fact be called Fico Depot. I assume this is just the area that is leading up to Fico Depot because there's just a bunch of storage crates outside and various challenges leading up to going inside to the train terminal. In Abe's Exodus, Fico Depot was yellow and, like most other locations, had a very expansive background and seemed to have many train cars in the background and moving tracks and stuff like that. Fico Depot in Soulstorm is similar to Abe's Exodus in that it has the Gluckin train cars and many moving tracks and such, but it looks to be a lot more active. There's a lot more parts to it. The train cars will actually be a hazard in this one. You'll have to jump past them and make sure you don't run into them on accident. Fico Depot in this game maintains the yellow theme that it had in the original game with all the metallic lattices and such, but it also has much more neon and a lot more industrial components going on through it. Just like in Slig barracks, there is a car that you can ride in and shoot things. And not only that, the large work zone performance sign seems to show that the owners of Fico Depot are actively analyzing how well their workers are working. The owner of Fico Depot in this game, we don't know his name yet. He's sort of the Aslik equivalent, but it'll be interesting to see what he does in this game. The depot can then go to two different locations, Boneworks or Soulstorm Brewery. But I'm not quite convinced that Boneworks is a separate location from the brewery as it was in Exodus in this game. I'll get into those reasons later. So I think the mudokons will travel straight to Soulstorm Brewery from Fico Depot.
Holy shit!
There's one area that I had trouble classifying. It seems to be outside a building and it has a lot of neon lights, so I think that it'll be outside Soulstorm Brewery because you can see that Soulstorm Brewery is completely neon. Lorne Lanning in one interview compared it to Las Vegas, so I think this area with the neon lights is right outside Soulstorm Brewery, and then Abe goes inside the brewery itself. In Abe's Exodus, Soulstorm Brewery was this massive red building with all of these crates of Soulstorm brew in the background and all of these interesting mechanical devices that you didn't really know what they were specifically. Soulstorm in this game seems to be a completely different environment. 3 clips in particular show exactly what Soulstorm will look like. The first one shows several Soulstorm barrels, just like in Abe's Exodus, but the area itself has many dark panelings behind it and doesn't expand so much as it did in Abe's Exodus. The other one shows the tier extractors, and this looks like a much darker environment, much grittier, and makes more sense for the theme that Soulstorm is going for. Every area shown is so dark and smoky, and it looks like just the place that Soulstorm Brew would be made. There are deadly pistons that can destroy you, and the place seems to be well guarded with 105 security members. There are also 81 mudokons to save in this area, so kind of small compared to some of the other areas that were seen before. It seems like a vast amount of the mudokons were in Necrum Mines. One really exciting thing I noticed from one of the clips is that it shows exactly how innovative 2.9D platforming is. In the past, there's just been a foreground and a background for Oddworld games, but in this part, it shows that if you walk one way in the walkway, you go to the background, but if you walk the other way, you stay in the foreground. It's an interesting level design, and I look forward to seeing exactly how this is implemented throughout the game. Another thing in this clip is that the lightning bolts, the security gates, are red, which is strange because in the past they've always been blue. However, this fits really well with the atmosphere of the rest of Soulstorm Brewery. As I said earlier, I think Boneworks and Soulstorm Brewery will be together in this game. Possibly Boneworks will be a part of Soulstorm Brewery, which makes sense because they'd be working the bones and they wouldn't want to export them to a completely different location. The reason that I think this way is because in the original concept art for Boneworks, there's this furnace. And we see this furnace in a couple different clips that are shown so far. In one clip, we see the brewmaster, and behind him is this furnace. So we know that because the brewmaster is likely in the brewery itself and not in a different location completely, it's likely that this furnace is inside the brewery. And we see this other playable location that has a similar furnace as well. So it's likely that this is within the brewery. One interesting piece of concept art that I stumbled upon in the book was this original image of Soulstorm Brewery. They had this idea of having a mudokon being forced to drink Soulstorm brew, and many of the pipes were faces throwing up Soulstorm brew. Because they're showing that they're using some of the original concept art for Boneworks, I wonder if they'll adapt any of this art into the game now, and that they just haven't shown it yet because they don't want to give it away. I'm really excited to see whether this is the case. Overall, I'm incredibly excited to see the new locations of Oddworld Soulstorm, and I really look forward to seeing exactly how all of the locations flow together and what new places we haven't seen yet in the trailers, because I'm sure that these trailers have only shown such a small portion of the game. Now, I want to get into what I think the main plot of Oddworld Soulstorm will be about. Lorne Lanning hyped up the game to be darker than any other previous game in the Oddworld series, which is incredibly surprising considering Abe's Exodus was about mudokons who were made blind by the gluckons so they could dig up their ancestral bones to be made into a brew. And the other ingredient of the brew is the tears of the mudokons who are being tortured endlessly by the gluckons. How can it get darker than that? Well, I think the darkness of the game is right there in the name of the game itself, Soulstorm. I don't think that the secret ingredient of Soulstorm Brew is the bones or the tears of the mudokons, but rather I think it'll be the souls of the mudokons themselves. My rationale for this theory comes from evidence that we've seen in both Abe's Exodus and new gameplay from Oddworld Soulstorm. In Abe's Exodus, when Abe is visited by the three weirdos, he sees that when the bones are taken away from the mudokons, their spirits are ripped away too. The spirits themselves don't have bones, so these bones are necessary for the spirits to exist in their present form. On top of that, one plotline in Abe's Exodus that is mentioned but isn't really expanded upon is when Abe goes to the temples, the Mudantian Mudamo Vault, he must free trapped spirits of mudokons by slapping a lock. For some reason, Soulstorm Mining Company has been keeping mudokon spirits under a lock and key. And when Abe frees those spirits, the spirits are released and they're green. You know what else is green? Soulstorm Brew. Now, there are two ingredients for Soulstorm Brew, the other being the tears of the mudokons. I think while the bones are the souls of mudokons past, the tears are the souls of mudokons present, that by torturing the mudokons, the gluckons are extracting their souls in the process. This brings a whole new level to the line,
We had twice! He fled out!
Now, that's the progression of the story that I think it will take. I think this game's a lot bigger than that, though. I think there will be a lot more to it than that. Lorne Lanning has talked about how there's now Gluckon societies that will learn more about the backstories of the Magog cartel, and that different mudokons will form groups of their own. For instance, the Mudokon Resistance, the spirit of 1029. No matter what the plot ends up being, I'm just so glad that Oddworld Inhabitants have stuck with this game series for so long and keep making quality content and trying to pursue their original goal of making such a beautifully artistic and fascinating game and continue building on this world that is so near and dear to so many people. And thank you, Oddworld Inhabitants, for really going out of your way to make an incredible game. I really look forward to playing it.